Welcome everyone to Sunshine State Digital Network webinar today. My name is Kayla Zayas Ruiz. I am the Sunshine State Digital Network Coordinator at Florida State University. Today's webinar is being presented in partnership with our friends over at the Society of Florida Archivists. We have enabled closed captioning for you if you need closed captions. Please press the CC button, which is located at the bottom of your Zoom window. Today's session is also being recorded, so keep that in mind. And we will be sending out the recording as well as additional resources for all of you after the webinar, probably early next week, since tomorrow is a holiday. And our presenters today are Crystal Thomas from Florida State University, David Benjamin at the University of Central Florida, and Jerry Schott, who is at Florida Southern College, all providing a wealth of expertise and experience for us today. So without further ado, I will pass it on to our presenters. Wait 1 second. If you have any questions, please feel free to add those into the chat box at any time. Some of them may be saved until the end, depending on what the question is, but our presenters have stated they will answer some questions during the presentation as well. So please type your questions in there and I will be sure that they get asked at the appropriate time. Okay, and now without further ado, I will pass it on to our presenters. So take it away, Jerry.
Thank you. Crystal's going to be the queen of changing the slides, so I will be interrupting myself saying, next slide. So today, we are going to be talking about introducing you to the basic activities required to take care of and process archival records. We expect you to learn about paper and digital records while we use some archival terms. And if we fail to define them, please go ahead and put a message in the chat box and we will answer. Next slide. The terminology that we're going to be talking and using today does pertain to both analog and digital materials, like the term intellectual control, which is the first step of processing, finding what you have and bringing it together to figure out what you wish to keep or process or digitize. Next slide. So you may have books, artifacts, objects, historical records in your overall collection. We didn't ask you where you're coming from, but my assumption is probably small local library archives where you have a history room and special collections. So you will have books, published materials. You will have records, hopefully, that they're unpublished and contain unique information. And you probably do have objects. Objects have a variety of formats and they may be unique. They're generally good for exhibits, but unless you're a museum, you really don't want to have to accept and store a bunch of three-dimensional objects because they're really hard to store and they have different preservation needs. Next slide. So today I am speaking about unpublished documents. You may call them archives, you may call them manuscripts, you may call them subject files. Well, what you first need to do is, when you're looking at your materials, when you're looking in your storage room, you have boxes of documents. Do they fit in with what you wish to collect? Or is it something that you can't find a reason to keep? Somebody may be offering you a new collection, a new box of things. Do you want to accept it? Librarians should be familiar with the collection development policy. Do you have one for your special collections? If not, think about creating one. It can help you if you wish to review something. You know, you can say, my administration has decided that we're not going to collect cartoons of whatever, and so thank you very much. You can see if there's someplace better for them. But back to your stuff, your room, your storage room, whatever. You want to gather the materials, take a look at what value these materials would have to your institution. And I'm speaking not in a monetary form, I'm speaking to the historical value. Does it tell a story about your area or the people in your community? Is there a history that's pertinent to your institution? If it's something that's about your institution, it would hold administrative value. If it's something about your community, it's a historical value. But you also want to look at the relationship of the materials that are being offered to what's already in your collection. Or if you are looking at your whole collection, maybe there's something that doesn't quite fit, you can think about deaccessioning it. And you can think about refusing it based on the idea that it doesn't fit in with your collection policy. Another thing to appraise a collection about is it too many documents? Can you handle it? Is somebody else in the area collecting it already? Maybe the donor is got a lot of needs and wants. Can you do what you would promise to do? Would you need to write a grant to digitize it? And do you have the time and the people to do that? So there can be many reasons why you should refuse the donation or deaccession something you already have. And that is what this concept of appraisal does for you. Next slide, please. If your appraisal decision is to reject the records, thank the potential donor kindly. Maybe next time they will have something you want. You can give them a decision of, you know, it doesn't fit into our collecting goals, but this is the time where you could refer them on to another repository. If your appraisal decision is to accept the records, then you will want to proceed with a formal transfer of the records and move them into your collections. Next slide. So transferring legal ownership of the records means legally acquiring the materials or searching in the institutional administrative files for any documents about the materials. Hopefully there's a letter, there could be a deed of gift, a newspaper clipping saying on this day we accepted 12 boxes from so-and-so. However, it is quite often that you have no clue where it came from or something appears on your doorstep, and you may want to keep it, knowing that there's some issues of legal to it. And sometimes you want to dispose of it. Disposal of undocumented collections is a topic for another day, though. So next slide. So if there is a new collection, you can purchase it, you can formally transfer it from another department, or get a deed of gift, which should include all the things listed on the slide. You especially want to talk about or think about copyright and including a mention of rights for putting it online. When I say that, there's issues of privacy. Maybe you have family correspondence and one of the people in the correspondence is very private and they don't want it online. If you put it up, you might have to take it down or a family fight ensues. There's a lot of problems with that. So if you can at least say on your deed of gift, well, Mrs. So-and-so gave us permission, then it's better. Next slide. So once you determine the legal status of the collection, then you want to establish what archivists call physical and intellectual control over the records. It means making sure you know what you have and where it is. Is it on a shelf? Is it in a storage room out in the back storage shed? At this point, you would like to have a staff member review the collection and create the documentation folder that you're eventually going to rely on to know what you have acquired and where it is stored. The best time to do it is immediately so that you don't forget. And you know, sometimes people can't do it, but leave yourself sticky notes. The more information you can gather at the point of transfer, the better off you'll be. Next slide. All right, so now we're talking about processing the collection. You want to establish physical control of the donation or the stuff you found on your doorstep or the stuff you uncovered in an unused room. Your first bet is to gather as much as you can together, or what you know goes together from the donor. You assign in an accession number, and this is a number. Usually it's based on a year and the consecutive number for the last donation. So if it's January 1st, you would say 2023-01 for the first collection of the year. If you've got a system, use the system. That's generally what people use to accession. You want to create a collection file, a deed of gift, the thank you letters, your inventory, newspaper clipping from the local newspaper, whatever it is that talks about the collection. And most importantly, inventory and label each physical container. When the process is complete, the boxes should be physically moved to your appropriate storage space, and put the location on a document for your collection file, so that you can find it all. When you store the materials, your number should be visible so that you can quickly locate material. It's not necessarily fun to pull out all the boxes and look and find the object that somebody really insists that they gave you. Been there, done that. Next slide. So we're about to really put hands on documents, hopefully. Arranging archival collections begins with research and review, as it's vital to know as much as you can and understand the arrangement you want before moving any files. It will save you time. The first thing you need to do is look up the accession record and learn what you can about the contents. Go back to that collection file. Where did it come from? How were they acquired? How much is there? Are you missing any boxes? Then you would need to begin learning about the creator of the records. What did the person or the group do? Why did they create the records? Learn about the person who created the records for things like when they lived, when they died, where were they born, what vocations, education, special events, family life. You are looking for biographical information. If it is an organization that created the records, what are its mission, functions, dates of operations, special events, board members, or locations? All of this will go into a description at the end of your process for the finding aid. And once you know who created the records and you've learned as much about them as possible, it's time to use your notes and knowledge to begin the actual organizing and arranging of the records. Next slide. I'm quickly doing the check to make sure I'm in the right space. So start separating what you think is the collection and lay it all out in front of you. Check your collection file for the location of all the boxes. It's so sad when you get to the end of the processing and you find out you have more boxes of materials. It happens occasionally. You would like to use original order. It's important. It's a foundation of archives. That original order gives context to how the organizer thought to arrange their materials. Maybe they used alphabetical order, but maybe they used, monthly date order, or who corresponded the most with themselves, the most important people. But sometimes the collection has been sifted through by relatives, by friends, by your own staff. And it's too hard to determine what the original order is. So determine, bring like things to like, put all your financial records together, put all your correspondence together. Your main idea is to be able to find things or make it easy for the researcher to find things. So you may, that might be all the photographs together. And then you would want to sort them by maybe color or black and white, something logical. Next slide. So once you've determined how, the original order, you're going to gather your archival supplies and start to organize them and rehouse them. So using acid-free, lignin-free, pH-buffered folders and boxes is really important if you can find it, afford it. The better the storage materials, the longer your materials will last. And what we're doing is to make things last as long as possible and make them accessible to people. So especially here in Florida, you want to remove things that rust. Too much humidity is bad for documents. It makes things rusty and then it eats through the paper. I do give you permission to copy newspaper clippings onto acid-free, lignin-free archival bond, or even to consider not keeping some collections of clippings. Check and see if they are pulled from a local newspaper, and then you may not need to keep the clippings. Maybe it's on microfilm, maybe things can be found on newspapers.com. Younger researchers like to search databases, and newspaper clippings are not real searchable online, and they are not necessarily unique information. If it's something like a birth announcement in the newspaper with a lock of hair and a photograph, keep all of that material. The newspaper clipping is important to that scenario. And then you can place that newspaper clipping between two pieces of the bond paper so that the acid in the newspaper is not migrating. Next slide. Next slide.
I did change it. Are you not seeing housing and environment?
Sorry.
No.
So while it would be wonderful to have cool, dry, dark storage, air conditioning space running at 68 degrees and 45% humidity here in Florida is out of the realm of most folks, but so look for stable year-round temps. Okay. Next slide. Okay. So arrange materials into an order. A hierarchical structure is good. So you may have financial records, and so it could be tax returns, do tax return for 2023, and then the next file underneath that would be all the receipts. It could be correspondence, it's alphabetical by generation, or it's by generation, then alphabetical underneath that. Being able to have a broad and then more specific is what I mean by the term hierarchical. Be careful when putting items in folders and boxes. Make the boxes fit the materials, so don't fold items. Discourage donors from writing on the backs of photographs or highlighting documents. Don't put your coffee on the table as you're processing collections. You want to be careful because accidents happen and you don't want to be that person. Next slide. So once you have arranged things and housed them, your next step would be to describe the collections. Archivists generally write a finding aid, which consists of a biographical note, a general description of the collection, and that is to see if the researcher even wants to get into the papers. Then the next level is a more detailed description of the series. For instance, are there letters that you expect to be there, but they're not? So you may want to say why something does not appear. If there are many letters from grandma and her favorite sister that suddenly stop because someone got angry and stopped writing, if you know that, you can put it into the finding aid so that people are not trying to do their own research. The finding aid can include subject headings, but it definitely needs to have a box list or an inventory. And by that, I mean a list of all the folder titles. Box 1, folder title 1, folder title 2, folder title 3. This will be a description you can give to researchers. They can look and say, oh yeah, I want to see the whole collection, or oh, I think I want to see box 2, folder 3. And if it's all there in a finding aid, it's there. In a library system, you might also use just a MARC record. It depends on what you need in your repository, but in-house you definitely need an inventory of the materials. Next slide. So I've given you a lot of information. It sounds daunting, but you can take it step by step and you can do it. There are many resources out there, many books and articles, and we will include a few when we send you information. And hold your questions for the end, and I'm going to hand this off to David.
Thanks, Jerry. Good afternoon. I'm David Benjamin, Head of Special Collections and University Archives at the University of Central Florida Libraries. I've been working in archives for 30 plus years. I began my career in the Kansas Collection Regional History Library at the University of Kansas. I then spent 17 years at the Wisconsin Historical Society before working at the Center for Creative Photography at the University of Arizona. My undergraduate degree is in art history with an emphasis on photography history. I have 2 masters. The first is in American architecture and landscape history, and the second is in library science. I spent much of my career working with visual materials. First as the visual materials archivist at the Wisconsin Historical Society, then as an archivist at the Center for Creative Photography. I have worked with thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of photographs, negatives, transparencies, films, videos, posters, and other materials that fall under the category of visual materials. I love working with visual materials. Why? They document our lives and they document our communities. The image on the left is a 1939 Wisconsin Conservation Department photograph of 2 men wrestling in smelt. Nothing is more Wisconsin than smelt wrestling. And the image on the right is a favorite of mine and reminds us all that we all have some crazy relatives in our family tree somewhere. Next slide. And visual materials document our society. These images are of Mrs. Glenn M. Wise, who was appointed Wisconsin Secretary of State in 1955. She was the first woman to hold the office. The principal Madison, Wisconsin newspaper's coverage of her appointment included images of her working and arranging flowers and cooking in the kitchen to remind everyone concerned that despite holding a critical state office, she wasn't neglecting her duties at home. I doubt the newspaper showed any of her male predecessors or successors performing their duties around the house. Visual materials are very compelling and show the past like nothing else. However, for some reason, people find visual materials intimidating. I'm not sure why, especially as we are a very visual society. How many photos and or videos do you have on your phone right now? I have 1,423 photos and 35 videos on mine. That's a lot, and trust me, most of mine are not worth keeping. Next slide. Today, I will discuss 5 essential things to remember when working with visual materials: acquisition, appraisal, arranging, processing, storage, and access. So you know you are getting the condensed version of this talk. Typically, I cover these topics in half-day or full-day workshops. As Betty Davis said in All About Eve, fasten your seatbelts. It's going to be a bumpy night. Next slide. Acquisition. Is it a keeper? A collection development policy is one of the most important things you need for any archival or manuscript collection, no matter the format. What story or stories are you trying to tell with your collection? Ask yourself a few simple questions. What subjects will you collect? What kinds of materials will you collect? What time period or periods will you collect? And how does this fit with other collections in your care? These are the basis for your collection development policy. This helps you determine what you will collect. Most importantly, it tells you and potential donors what you don't take, what subjects you don't collect, what kinds of materials you don't collect, and what time period or periods you don't collect. This needs to be a written document available to anyone and everyone. This will save you many, many hours talking with potential donors as you graciously try and decline materials that you don't want or don't fit into your collection. It is also useful when deaccessioning or weeding existing collections. Next slide. You must determine what is in a collection, whether it's an unprocessed collection already in your care or something new you are considering acquiring. This is where things get real and overwhelming. I tell people to chunk it out. Don't think you have to sort through every collection all at once right now. Look at it collection by collection, box by box. Pick something and start working on it. The hardest thing to do is getting started. Once you're started, you'll get into a routine and things will move along smoothly. There's no magic formula to this. However, here are some of the things I look for when working with a collection for the first time. I start with, is there an original order? And if so, what is that order? And how or why was the collection created and who was the creator? Next, I ask myself a series of questions. What type of materials are in the collection? Portraits, grip and grins, publicity, snapshots, what formats, videotape, DVDs, 8mm film, negative, positives, etc. What is represented in the collection and what is not represented in the collection? Is there a related manuscript or archival collection? If so, what is the relationship of the visual materials to other parts of the collection? Are there preservation concerns? If there are significant issues, you might decide not to take the collection or only a portion of the materials. Are there unique formats or other items that will add something new to your library or archive? Does the collection include obsolete formats, formats you can no longer access? For example, do you have a DVD player at your institution? These used to be standard on most computers, but not anymore. We recently discovered here in special collections in university archives, none of our new computers have a DVD player. We are having to get one to plug in to a public computer for patrons to view DVDs. It's important to keep written notes while doing this. You will want to refer to them if you acquire the materials and as you process the collection. Next slide. And I'm going to say it, you must weed collections. I like to start with a simple exercise when teaching classes and workshops in archives and visual materials. I give everyone in the class a photograph. I have them look at the photograph, and then one by one, we go around the room and describe the image to everyone else. So in this case, I talk about, oh, it's a rural scene. There's a church. It's very idyllic. It's like, oh, I'd like to visit here. I want people to become attached to them. At the end of the class, I tell everyone to hold up the photograph and tear it up. Just tear it apart. And you all don't know how good this really feels. It's interesting to see the reactions. Some people quickly tear them into shreds. Those are the people who will make good visual materials archivists. Others are more hesitant, and some just won't do it. Those are the people I discourage from specializing in visual formats. You can't keep everything. Let me say that again. You can't keep everything. Not everything is worth keeping. Again, I repeat, not everything is worth keeping. Wait, one more time. Not everything is worth keeping. What to weed depends on your collection and collection development policy. None of this is set in stone, and as we like to say in archives, it depends. Some broad criteria for weeding could include any of the following: unknown or unidentified images. I was working on a family collection at the Wisconsin Historical Society that included hundreds of unidentified photographs. While discussing weeding the collection, I was told I should keep all the unidentified images. The person said, someone sometime might be able to identify someone in some of the photographs. That's a whole lot of someones, sometimes, somes, and might. I weeded the collection. In the end, it made the collection stronger and easier to use. When you have that many someone, sometimes, sons, and might, that's a good chance you need to weed the collection. Another criteria for weeding are items that are out of the scope of your collection development policy. See, that written collection development policy is already coming in handy. Are the materials unrelated to existing collections? This usually applies to materials already in your collection that you want to weed. You have to decide, do you want to keep duplicates, triplicates, multiples? That's really a decision for you and your institution. I will say for some things in special collections and university archives, especially university archives, we may keep 2 copies or 3 copies. One would be the copy that what we would call the master original copy. Another copy might be one we use for exhibit. And a third, especially university archives, is stuff we may take around campus when we're doing talks about the collection. And finally, you should think about weeding things that are badly deteriorated. However, if this material is within the scope of your collection, you may want to digitize the items before weeding them. Your deed of gift for these materials may and should dictate if, when, and how to dispose of the materials in your collection. Next slide. Arranging processing, how to organize it. This is the fun part and often the most challenging. You are bringing some type of order to the materials. I don't have time to discuss processing in great detail this afternoon, but I will take a touch on a few key takeaways. Remember the notes you took when you were identifying what you had? This is when you look back over those notes, and all that work you did up front will pay off now. As Jerry mentioned, there are 2 essential concepts in archival processing: original order and provenance. Original order is when you keep the collection in the order in which it was received. I will be honest, very few of the visual materials collections I have processed through my career had a discernible order. However, there were some notable collections. Often it is a photographer's collection and they had some kind of photo log, or it's organization or an office where there was someone who oversaw the filing throughout time. The other important concept is provenance. You don't mix materials created by one entity with materials created by a different entity. In other words, you don't mix Jerry's stuff with Crystal's stuff, even if both collections are about me. They have different creators, so they are different collections. Unlike original order, provenance is the rule you never break. Organize the collection on paper before you physically move materials in the collection. This will save you a lot of time, tears, and heartache. Take it from someone who learned this the hard way. A few other things to remember. The physical order and the intellectual order may not be the same. The order in which you store the materials may differ from how you organize them in the finding aid or the research guide. Keep it as simple as possible. Complicated organization schemes just lead to frustration for the user and for yourself. And lastly, think like a researcher. If you were using this collection, what order makes sense to you? Be one of your own researchers. I cannot stress that enough. That can be really helpful when you're trying to decide how to organize a collection. Next slide. And I'm going to say it again. You must weed your collections. You cannot keep everything. Not everything is worth keeping. Once again, the deed determines how you dispose of materials during processing. It may seem strange that I keep emphasizing this, but my 30+ years as an archivist has taught me one of the hardest things for people to do is to weed a collection. And I'm in that group. When I have to weed something, I can sometimes agonize it over it well beyond when I should. I just have to remind myself weeding is a natural part of processing. We cannot keep everything. Next slide. Storage, how to store it. So you have successfully acquired, appraised, and arranged revision materials. Congratulations. Now it's time to shelve them. Again, we could spend hours discussing the proper storage of vision materials. However, I will boil it down to a few key points. Use archival quality materials. This is vital to ensure the continued preservation of your collection. There are numerous vendors you can use. Just make sure they are a reputable dealer. Beware, just because it says archival or acid-free doesn't mean they are quality supplies. This is really the case with materials you may get at a hobby shop or a craft store. They may say archival, but there's no standard for that. So choose a reputable dealer. And understand the environment where your collections are stored. What's the temperature and relative humidity in your stacks or storage space? For decades, people have thrown out the numbers 72 degrees and 45% relative humidity as the standard. That standard came from Great Britain. We live in Florida. We live in a state where the humidity is so high, we call it the air you wear. Instead of worrying too much about the numbers, avoid significant temperature and relative humidity fluctuations. For example, the relative humidity of one of our storage areas hovers around 55%. That's well above the 45% standard. Rather than struggle to get that number down, we work to keep the relative humidity between 53 and 57%. We do the same with temperature, avoiding fluctuations of less than 2 degrees up or down. For us, we monitor spaces routinely. Several areas we look daily or every other day. If we see something to start to creep up, we'll watch it for a day or two. And if it continues to creep up, we call in our facilities people and we say there's a problem here and we need to solve it. That is one of the key things we do towards preservation. In the end, you can only do so much, so do the best you can. Here in the Special Collections University Archives, we don't refolder all our collections into new folders or put all our photographs into Mylar enclosures. We don't have the staff or the funds to do this. A side note about conservation versus preservation. Ensuring your collections are stored in a stable environment, rehousing them to an appropriate level, and working with staff and patrons to ensure materials are handled correctly are all part of preservation. Conservation involves doing some type of treatment on materials due to damage, decay, or disaster. Conservation should be left to a professional, especially for visual materials. Only qualified, trained conservators should work on your materials. Think stabilization over restoration. And if you are going to, quote, restore something, it should be done on a reproduction and not on the original. Next slide. Access. How will patrons find it? Ultimately, you need to provide access to the collections in your care. We are information professionals. This is what we do. Archives typically create some type of finding aid to provide access to their holdings. In my career, I have created these on paper and in electronic form. I have done Word documents, PDFs, spreadsheets, and databases. All work at some level. I think the saying, "you do you," works well here. You need to determine what works best for your patrons and your institution. What worries me is when someone says all the information about their collection is stored in their head. That is not a good solution. And now, 2 final thoughts before Crystal talks about digital archives. Next slide. Don't panic and avoid becoming overwhelmed. Thank you.
Sorry, folks, 1 second. What just happened? There we go. Sorry. Switching myself over was needed a moment. All right. Thank you, Jerry and David, for setting such a great base for me to talk and sort of pivot a little towards digital archives. And I organized my talk around sort of 3 big myths that I want to discuss today. These myths apply to both materials you may choose to digitize from your physical holdings and to materials that are born digital. So those are the materials that are going to find their way to you via physical media, such as CDs and external hard drives, files that people will send to you via email, bring to you on a thumb drive. Also, if you're like me, it'll be the mysterious files that are just found on a library server one day, and IT decides that you're the person that has to decide what's going to happen to them. So the 3 myths that I want to touch on today are: 1, it's easier to find things once they're digitized. 2, it's easier to store things once they're digitized. And 3, because it's easier to find and store things when they're digital, you should just keep them all at that point. So, like so much of archiving, and as you heard both Jerry and David say today, it very much depends on a lot of factors if something is easy or not, particularly as we move into the realm of digital files, either ones that you've created via digitization or ones that are born digital. Finding materials can be easier once they are digital, as long as work has gone into making them discoverable and sustainable over time. So here's a truth. Digital content is at risk from the moment it is created. It is dependent on hardware, software, and humans for access. Rapid technology changes means the threat of obsolescence is there from the moment of creation. So what you want to try and do is stack the deck in your favor to make sure that these files are going to remain discoverable and usable over the long term for your organization. You need to be keeping digital files in formats that are recognized as good preservation file formats, such as TIFF files for still images and PDF files for text documents. If you're unsure what a good stable format may be for content files that you have, the Library of Congress maintains and updates regularly a recommended format statement that covers all different types of file formats that you may encounter. You also want to make sure that your file names are serving you long-term. Computers are persnickety and get cranky when you don't follow rules that they like. File naming is this place with lots of unwritten rules that are very easy to break. Computers hate spaces in file names, as Edna is reminding us here. They will bend themselves over backwards to try and deal with spaces in file names by adding a lot of sort of junk characters to fill that space. And that means that eventually over time, The computer may have added so much junk into the file name that it's actually not even able to open the file anymore. There is also certain punctuation that you want to avoid when making file names, such as periods. So right now we are dealing with a very large collection of digital legacy media. It has over 1,000 floppy disks, lots of CDs, hard drives, zip drives, pretty much any type of obsolete digital media you can think of, this collection has. And so we've had students pulling the files off that media and start to look through them. And this was a donor that loved to put lots of periods in his file names, where I would potentially put a dash or an underscore, he put a period. And that must have been okay back in the day. But these days, computers see the file name, the words of the file name, and they see a period. And anything after that first period is telling them what to do with the file. So it's looking for a period doc, period XLS, period MP4. It's looking for the instructions on what to do. If you have file names with lots of periods, the computer just doesn't know what to do with it, and it refuses to open it. So dashes and underscores are your friends with file names because computers like them. Doesn't put a space, so it's not going to try and put a lot of junk in there that will screw things up. And you're not messing with the period and extension files so that the computer continues to know what to do with it. Now, some people love to put descriptive information in their file names, and this is great, and we also love this, because otherwise we may have no clue what the file or photograph is. The file name is sort of the equivalent to the back of the photograph in the digital realm. But that isn't the best place to keep all that information long-term. What I recommend is to create a simple text file or spreadsheet, save it in the same directory with the content files, and store any of that descriptive information from the file name in that document, and then rename the file something a bit simpler, probably using the collection number you've given it as you've processed this collection. You would then track the new file name and the original information in the document you've created. You may also collect more descriptive information here if you know the date of the photograph or the file, who created the photograph or the file, and you're going to put that all in this spreadsheet that you started. And bonus, congratulations, you've just started creating metadata that you can use to make these materials more easily discoverable. But it took work, right? The creation of metadata or description for digital content is incredibly time-consuming. Done right, yes, digital content can be easier to find, but done poorly or not at all, and what you're left with is lots of folders full of files with names like image 001, which is certainly not making it any easier for you to find. And one last thing before we move on from this myth, no one's going to be able to find anything if it only lives on your local machine. So you want to make sure that if you win the lottery tomorrow, all the files and the metadata that you've been creating lives in a location that other members of your organization know how to find it and how to use it. Now, all of this work in making things easier to find once they're digital has created another problem, which is also another myth, which is where are you storing all of these files, potential file derivatives, and description that you've created? Once again, we do need to discuss what we mean when we say it's easier with this particular myth. Yes, digital files are not taking up physical space at your organization. And yes, if organized and described well, they may be easier to maintain over time than physical materials. But there is still work that needs to be done for either of those conditions to actually be true. So let me remind you of our truth, that digital content is at risk from the moment it is created. It is dependent on hardware, software, and humans for access. And rapid technology changes means the threat of obsolescence is there from the minute a file is created. Which means in this particular myth, you cannot just put those files somewhere and never think about them again. So digital storage has gotten cheaper over time. You can pay Amazon Web Services tenth of a penny yearly for digital storage, for massive amounts of digital storage. But that is per gigabyte, and that's also per usage. So if you find yourself maintaining terabytes worth of data that you need access to on a daily basis, suddenly digital storage is not so cheap, because storage is actually a bit misleading. Yes, you need to store these files somewhere, but chances are you're not just putting them there and never needing to look at them again. Most of the time, digital preservation is a different beast, and we'll get to that in a minute. So when you're talking about digital storage, you're also asking the question, how do you plan to provide access to these materials? Are you going to store and host them yourselves and only provide access, say, from a single terminal in your organization's reading room? Are you going to use a digital content platform of some kind, like Content DM or Omeka? Will you pay a company to host that software and your files, or are you going to do it yourself? Again, it may be easier to store digital files, but actually providing access to them over time comes with more considerations and costs. Which brings us to preservation of these files over time. Now, as I noted above, digital preservation is a different, more complicated process than providing access to files or just having backups of your files somewhere. I teach whole webinars on digital preservation. But the thing to keep in mind here is that you may decide that having your files in a distributed cloud service storage space is good enough for right now. And that is a perfectly legitimate decision based on resources and priorities at your institution. Over time, you may decide that a subset of your digital collections need to be kept in a dark archive storage situation. And at that point would be the time to develop the workflow and tools that you need to complete that kind of work. Ooh, one of my favorite questions and myths. So due to the points that we just discussed around how to manage, provide access, and preserve digital files, no, you are not keeping everything forever. The same rules apply to digital files as applies to your physical files. And it's okay. I promise it's okay not to keep everything forever. Just because something has been digitized or it came to you as a digital file does not mean you have to keep it. The same principles of selection, appraisal, accessioning, and weeding apply to digital files that apply to any physical collections you may have. And I would argue potentially even more so in the digital realm. Because remember all those photos David has on his phone? I have like over 5,000. I have a photographer father who takes thousands of photos on a daily basis when he's at an event. What we don't want to be wading through in the future, though, is 20 photographs of the same person in just a slightly different pose at the same event, just moving their hand. That would be just as annoying in the digital space as it would be if you got a folder of photographs in the reading room with 20 photographs of the same person speaking in the same position. This myth also goes along with the ever popular, now that you digitized it, you're throwing it out, right? It's another myth that will make any digital archivist shudder if you say that to them. However, with that particular myth, it does have an it depends. So no, I promise you, we are not digitizing our rare books and manuscripts here at FSU and then throwing them out in the dumpster afterwards. We're not digitizing those to provide more space on our shelves, but to better access to them. However, with potentially some less precious volumes, this could be on the table. As a graduate student, I worked at the University of Michigan in the digital conversion unit there, and we were working on a project that was part of the bigger Google Books project at the time. And we would go out into the remote storage facility, pull a set of books that had been deemed, that had been decided they would go through destructive digitization. We would disbind them, guillotine them, wrap them in plastic, and send them off to a high-density digitization vendor. And after the vendor digitized those, they would recycle them. And all we would get back is the digital files. So digitization can be a powerful tool in a weeder's toolbox when it comes to published materials, particularly mass published materials that are simply not considered rare or unique in libraries. But it is rarely the truth. It's just one of those exceptions that will pop up when it comes to digital content. So again, as both Jerry and David told you, and as one famous book reminds us constantly, don't panic. The sheer volume of digital collections, and they do seem to grow exponentially on a regular basis. I swear there are more every time I go and look in our file system. That would overwhelm anyone. So start small, work to get control over the materials that you have, and make sure that they're in good shape. Create a file inventory. That can be as simple as a spreadsheet, or if you are feeling techie, you can use command line tools to create file inventories for you. You can work on fixing those file names that computers don't like, removing spaces and periods from where they shouldn't be. Track these changes in that file inventory so that someone coming after you knows what you've done to the files. You can organize files into meaningful directories. Original order is really, really, really hard to discern in digital files, so it's actually rarely used in form digital processing. But you can take all the minutes from that one committee and put them into a single directory folder, because that's going to make them really easy for you to find them and for any patron to use them down the road. At the start is also a great time to save all those Microsoft Word documents that you've got as PDF files. PDFs are a more sustainable file format over time, and they have the added bonus that it's harder to change the content of a PDF file than a Word document. So nothing could accidentally be written over or edited while you are the custodian of that document. And lastly, and this might be my favorite part, delete to your heart's content. And I'm being serious, just delete. You do not need 20 copies of the same flyer. You don't need 20 digital photos of that same person speaking from only a slightly different angle every time at the exact same event. No one needs that. Just delete it. Just get it out of your life. Like all things digital, there is no one size fits all for this work. There just isn't, and that's okay. You need to be willing to experiment, know when you're in over your head, and also know where to go when you don't know where to go. There are lots of organizations that are already doing this kind of work. And remember, they already figured it out. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. Go look at comparable or aspirational organizations to your own and see what they're doing, and then talk to them. Beg, borrow, and steal from their documentation and workflows to get yourself started, and then adjust as you learn and as you use that documentation to make sure it works better for you and your organization when it comes to your digital collections. And that's what I have about digital archives. The next slide is myself, David, and Jerry are putting together some example documentation for you that will help you tackle your different archival challenges. That is in this example documentation directory here. We will be adding to this also after the presentation. I know a couple things need to be put in, but that's where to go to find example templates of, say, deeds of gift, inventory templates, that sort of thing. We wanted to be able to provide you something concrete that you could start working with. And thank you all for listening so attentively. And we can do questions now.
Yes. So I want everyone to join me in thanking our presenters today. So if you want, you can use your applause reactions in the bottom of the screen while we wait for questions to come in. And do please feel free to add your questions to our chat box. And I will read those for our presenters today. And if your question is going to be directed at a particular presenter, just include that in your question.
I have a question. Can the chat people see stuff in the chat?
Yes.
Can everyone see the chat? I've just put in something that we recently discovered. We have a new archivist who's working for us. She started in June. And she said, hey, do we have the following publication? Sample forms for archival and records management programs. It's an ARMA International SAA publication. We didn't. I found it as a PDF that was cheap at the time. This morning, I went searching for it, and I can no longer find that PDF. And I found one on Amazon for $106. I'm like, oh no. If you can get your hands on there, and you can do it through interlibrary loan, this has got some amazing things in it. Stuff we're using for forms we wanted. We recently redid our whole accessioning process. And our new archivist Ariel just did major update to the processing manual. And this had great forms all the way through it. Don't feel you have to start and create everything on your own. Archivists librarians and archivists both, we don't do that. We call a friend. We phone a friend and go, hey, Crystal, I remember you talked about X. Can you send me that? And that's where you get started. Don't think you have to create this on your own. And we love to talk to people, so don't hesitate to reach out. But this is a really, if you can get a copy of this, I'm going to track. Oh, I notice it's in HathiTrust. And so you may be able to get the whole thing through there if you have access to that. But it's pretty amazing.
I'll plug our partners at the State Library as well. The State Library of Florida has a professional development collection for librarians and archivists. If you are a librarian or for a library in the state of Florida, you can get a free library card from the state library. You can apply online, and they will send you books from that collection for you to borrow. And they probably have that book in their collection, I would imagine. So use those resources that are available to you. That is all free. So our other partners at the state library, there to save the day when professional development resources are a little too much. Oh, and Lindsay Harrington, who is from the state library, has happily posted a link for you all in the chat to sign up for library cards. So thank you, Lindsay. And Crystal also posted a link to that directory for documentation. Like she said, there will be sample templates in there for you to get started with physical or digital inventories, examples of deeds of gift, examples of collection development, policy language, different things like that. All the things that we talked about, that our presenters talked about today, there will be some examples in there for you to get started with creating your own policies and documentation related to your collections. And not everything's in there right now, but things will be added. A link to that will also be included with the recording. So no worries there. Does anyone have any questions? If you have specific questions about your own collections, you are also free to ask those now. It doesn't have to be a general question. Jerry.
Well, I'll speak up and say, I know we may have sounded repetitive, but that's because you want to do the same thing with physical files and digital files. Yes, you can arrange digital files, but you do need a good file name, and that really does say the same thing for a physical file. I mean, if a collection's miscellaneous 1982, miscellaneous 1983, you know, oh my gosh, what are you going to find? So you know, the same principles go across formats.
I will tell a little bit while I encourage people again. And as people who know me, I can fill the void. So the thing about something Crystal, when Crystal was talking, this popped into my head. At the Wisconsin Historical Society, one of the first fully digital collections of images we got was from the governor's office, from the governor didn't run again and his office was clearing out. We got all these files and we're like, great. We worked with our digital staff. I'm like, I cannot look at these hundreds of files. And so we're like, let's look at the metadata. Great. What we found out is the intern forgot to set the date and time on the camera. So everything was dated the same date. Because we're like, here's what we're going to do, folks. We're going to look at the date. And it's a brilliant idea. Look at the date and look at the governor's calendar and go, okay, we know this is an important event. If there were photographs, I need to go in and look at that file. We started that, and there was the date time was the same on every photograph the person had taken throughout the governor's 6 or 8 years in office. So that became it was a much different process then. This was happening when as I was leaving the Historical Society to go to Arizona, and the digital archivist was a good friend of mine, and she later said she used a program to start to look that was available to look for what appeared to be duplicates and started with that. used, artificial intelligence back in the day to look for that. But we thought we found the perfect solution. So sometimes the perfect solution is not there when you think it's going to be. But the moral of that also story is you need to weed your collections. And I think I can say it more times if I need to. But all of us would agree. And I think it's very hard. And I don't want to make people think that I just like go, oh, let's throw things out. No, I agonize. Trust me, I agonize. But I also know you have to do it because you cannot keep everything. You keep everything and you're never going to find what you need.
You'll run out of space.
Yeah.
It'll be a mess. What I've found, or what I'm starting to encourage, the folks in my division who are the ones that generally are approached by donors, I'm usually brought in later after donors already approach us, is to, one, bring me in early in the conversation, but two, that donor's there. Like, if it takes me going and sitting with them at a laptop for them to be and go through their 20 terabytes of photographs, because chances are I don't need all 300 from every FSU basketball game ever played that he photographed. And he goes through and he's like, these are the 3 that I would consider the best, and those are the 3 I'm going to give to you. That is one, donors love when you ask their opinion. They really love to feel involved with their collection a lot of the time, particularly photographers, and digital collections. That has been what I've dealt with the most, is huge digital photo collections coming in. So the more you can engage with the donor and make them a part of the process and have them help you weed before you may even accession that collection in, the easier your life is going to be in the long run. And even if they still want to give you the 300 photos from every game they ever shot, at least I know what game they were, when it was, who they were playing, the photos that were selected by athletics to be kept, the photos that were kept by the local paper. So I have a lot of information, even if I end up with those 300 photos per game. It's a 16 terabyte collection, I think, that we've been working our way towards acquiring. So sometimes you get more information by talking to someone than just being like, oh, I'll take it in and figure it out later. Particularly with digital files, you might not always have the later because they are much less stable than anything you bring in on paper. That's just kind of the nature of the beast with digital files.
I think digital they're daunting to me, but I just have to remind myself it's a different format, and that's really what it is. There are certain things that are different. I mean, I can't go, it's absolutely everything the same, but Jerry said it, and we all said it. It's the same principles. There are these same basic principles that run all the way through archives. And it's just how you apply them to what you have. And that's really key. But it's also the 2 biggies, original order and provenance. To me, there's one biggie: provenance. Original order, in archive school, you learn original order is so important, and then in real life you're kind of sitting there going, But provenance is something that I think is the key, and that tells you so much, and that runs the gamut of all records. And if nothing else, if you're at an organization and you've been charged with becoming the archivist, that's one thing you definitely want to do, is that kind of provenance and paperwork. And I'm going to be adding some files to that link that are some deeds of gifts. And one thing we started here is a collection receipt form, and that is not a deed of gift. And I will include that in there. I apologize, I didn't get it into. I went to do it last night and forgot. That is something I created after we got here, based on something we did at the Wisconsin Historical Society, which is a piece of paper that anyone can fill out. And so this came about because someone dropped some materials at our circulation desk and said, this is for the archives. And it was a student. They took it. They were polite and wonderful, but they didn't think to go, who are you? And why are you donating this? So it came to me, and I'm like, so who was this? And the poor student's like, I didn't ask. And so I was like, that's really on me, not on them. And so I created a form that basically gathers information. Who brought it in? What's their contact information? Why did they choose to bring it in? And it says right on there, this is, and then the person signs it all, and then the person who accepted it also puts their name on it. And it says this is not means we're accepting this. This means it's simply a document that shows it came here and this is the information I need. And now a staff member in the department will get back with you with the final decision. And that has worked really well, because that means anybody, one of our students can take material in if they need to. And we get the information we need.
You're not making any promises that you're gonna keep it. Which is also important because sometimes those donor expectations are high.
Yes, yes. And you learn as an archivist to deal with donors, but a lot of people don't, and you just say to people, don't say you're accepting it, say, I'll make sure the right person gets it and gets back in touch with you.
Yes. It looks like we do have a question in the chat, so I'll read that out loud. We have some sawmill photographs on pasteboard that we're struggling over whether or not to keep. We have similar photographs on pasteboard that we know belong to a court case, as the backs of the pasteboards are documented, and on the photos as well. However, on the sawmill photographs, all we have is a lawyer's name. Since this name belongs to grandfather, father, and son, and all were lawyers, all in the same law firm, so dating the photos is difficult. To make matters worse, the files for this law firm were destroyed in a fire. It was suggested that we look at court cases, but with no information on what sawmill or where it was located or what date, you can see why we aren't sure if we should keep the photographs. Any advice for this person?
Okay, I'll start. Boy, don't give me a microphone, folks. I'm like Oprah. I understand, if not know anything about your institution, are sawmills something you might have had in the area? And if so, maybe you keep them for that. So they take on a different value. They're not, hey, this is related to law cases. This is, hey, this is part of an industry we had at some point in the past, and we have some information, we have some images of it. If there are no sawmills and anything like that, and you think it came in as part of a court case, but you don't know anything, I would, oh, okay, we have a booming lumber industry. Maybe then you go, fine, it came in as this, we're going to put it out as this. And so you have some subject files that show sawmills. If they're really, there could be some amazing photos in there. There also could be some garbage photos in there that you're like, yeah, it's a piece of equipment, we don't know what it is. No one seems to know what it is. I might look at it like that and go, if I don't know the provenance of it, we're unsure, I might say, fine, we're going to keep it because sawmills are important to our history, and there's some great images of sawmills in here. And that's not just with photos. I think a lot of the materials we have in our care come in for one reason, but get used for another reason. So I would keep. Do you need to keep them all? No. I think you have, unless you have a deed that says you cannot weed these, you have the right to weed these. Record it, create some of the documents. So if later on the family comes in and go, they gave this, and we're like, well, we didn't know that at the time, so here's what happened. But I think you could keep them. And if you can't date them, that's not an issue. Another thing, though, is you might find someone who's an expert in sawmills, and there are people out there, trust me, that are. You might be able to go, hey, could you come look at some photos for us? And they might be able to help you date them.
Yeah, my recommendation, particularly as you're a public library, I assume you have social media accounts. Digitize like one or two and put them out and be like, does anyone know where this was? Who owned the sawmill? Does anyone remember anything? Could give you any context for that photograph. I've seen a lot of archives really harness the power of their local community to identify unidentified photographs in the past. So you could try that too. If you're still wavering, you're like, oh, I don't know what I want to do. Just put out a call with just a couple of images and see if you can get any information from anyone that might also just point you in the right direction to help you identify them in a more meaningful way.
I would agree with Crystal about using social media. I recently attended an event in this area that was related to barn photography, and this guy was showing photos he had taken of barns to and like this audience, the Historical Society. And a lot of people recognized the barns. They knew whose property it was on and like where it was. So I'm not saying have an event, but you can use social media to help identify stuff sometimes.
I love that. And if you have an event and you want people to handle the photographs, but you're concerned, make photocopies and let them, have the originals up here where people aren't rummaging, and then have photocopies because people can rummage, they can touch, people can write on it. When I was dealing with family collections or people working with their own personal collections, I'd say photocopy, take to your family reunions, let grandma write all over them, because my grandmother on all her stuff wrote the name of the person on the front of the photograph. So we know what it is because it's right over their face. You can do that with photocopies. And it's a great way to do it. I will say one thing. I think if you can't get something identified, don't assume. And there's a great story. And I tried to find the image and now I can't. At the Wisconsin Historical Society, there was an image that was called Irish Maids. And it was, after the first time it was used a number of times over some pretty major publications about history of maids or history, right? One day, finally, one of us looked back and we're like, oh, they were neither Irish nor maids. It was a group of college girls dressed up for Halloween. And somehow someone called it Irish Maids once in a publication, and other people said, Irish Maids, I need that. So be very careful. That's why I prefer unidentified over we think it's X.
There's a thank you. The photographs are awesome and we want to keep them, but we got bogged down on the law side of it. So yeah, no, you can look at it from another angle, make it an engagement aspect to the collection. So added bonus there. Another comment here is right now at UNF, we just put up a bunch of pictures of unidentified kids from over a century ago as part of the Eartha White collection. I really hope their descendants can recognize them and let us know who they are, because right now we have no clue. Just one identified kid after another. And those pictures are already digitized and on their digital commons site.
Good luck. That could work.
Yeah. So question about ethical concerns. So are there ethical concerns raised when reaching out to someone who did not donate the papers when trying to establish family connections to the collection subject? I'm processing a collection where there was a large amount of documents donated that involve numerous people that I have been able to locate and could potentially reach out to verify how they and others may have been related, but I'm unsure if there's anything I should take into consideration before reaching out, or if this is generally discouraged.
I'm happy to take that one. I think it's okay to reach out to people. Be prepared for somebody to say, oh my gosh, I don't know that you have that. Can I see what's in there? And also be prepared to, if they like what they see, they'll ask for copies. I wouldn't necessarily put something like that up online, because that's the point where they go, oh my God, I hate that picture of me when I was a little kid, take it down. And you really do need to take it down, just because if it makes somebody uncomfortable, they're going to worry about it forever, where to you, you can say more pictures available on site. And then you have in that folder something where no copying is allowed or something like that. You want to know how it got there, and that you actually have a solid deed of gift, because if the person who donated it was the one who created the materials and they give you the permission to have them, then that's where you can say, you know, I know you're uncomfortable with this photograph, but we're going to keep it and we're going to keep it private. So yes, go ahead and reach out if you have your ducks in a row, solid copyright, solid deed of gift, and you're prepared to, you know, make copies.
I agree with,
Oh, go ahead, David.
no, go ahead, Crystal.
Oh, I was gonna say, I've had a similar experience when I was working with an organization's papers. They had come in through a different collection. Someone had been a member of the sorority and had kept a lot of documentation around her work as a sister and an officer for the sorority. And I did ask for representatives of the current house to come over and look at the material to make sure it was something we could digitize and include in the project. Particularly with organizations, there's a lot of proprietary information, particularly with sororities and fraternities as well, if you deal with them at all. And also that was a good relationship building. It showed that I was a responsible caretaker of that collection. And they were interested in potentially giving more of, you know, the sororities information to FSU in the future, potentially. So it was a good opportunity to establish that, that relationship, and just so that I was going through the motions of being a good caretaker of that information.
I think one thing is important is you just ensure you have all your, as Jerry said, ducks in a row, all the appropriate paperwork, because you never know. You just have to be prepared what you may step into. I think archivists should also be called archivist/therapist sometimes, because you will, oh, sometimes the family drama you jump into, you're like, whoa, folks. But you just have to be prepared for that. So if you have a clear deed of gift and the person said, I own these and gave them, that's important for you before you reach out. Most people won't. You just never know. I mean, 30 plus years, a couple times we've been involved in something where one family member did not want the other one to do that, and they did it, and you're just like, oh, goody, you know, I'm going to be on Jerry Springer if I'm not careful. So I think you can, though, because you need to, if you can identify some of this stuff, that's important.
Yeah, I would agree. As someone who tries to give lots of training to archivists about creating digital descriptions and adding more and more context than you would need in an archival description, gathering as much context is as you can, I think, is really important. So I don't think there's any ethical concerns with reaching out to people. I think it's probably best practice if they're still alive. That's the other thing, is we can't do that for all collections. So if you can find them and they're still alive, use them now. For don't you like not use them, but like capitalize on that resource while it's still available to you. So what are some steps to start taking off if you have something and you want it digitized, but you don't have a deed of gift? We have a box of addictive belts that contain interviews from someone affiliated with us in the 60s and 70s and has passed on since.
I can start and you can jump in. So if they've passed on and you have no way to find, you know, who might be next of kin, I usually would look for family, but that's more being ethical and best practice. In a lot of ways, at that point, you're just negotiating the level of risk you're willing to take on. If this is something that you can digitize and put online and you have a very clear takedown policy, like if someone comes at you and is like, I own the copyright and you can't have this up, the worst they're probably going to do to you is a cease and desist letter, and you'll just have to make them private. This probably is not something they could make money off of, and you probably have not stolen any money from them by making it available prior. So that is just navigating whatever your institution's level of risk is, in terms of digitizing, putting something up that is technically clearly in copyright, even if you aren't 100% sure where that copyright lives at the moment. But for something like that, betting it's a fairly low risk undertaking, barring knowing like maybe there are ins and outs of that collection that make it more complicated. But that is something I would be willing to put online with our clear takedown policy and procedures in place if someone was like, no, that's mine.
I look at it as a different way too, is this could be as simple as you could say, even if you don't put it online, I think digitizing, because you've got to update the format. That is something I strongly feel we have the right to do, and we can separate that from putting it online.
That is protected by copyright, actually, if you're transferring the format for access, because of preservation concerns, or it's an obsolete format, that is covered under copyright. That doesn't violate copyright law.
And we do that a lot. We're digitizing this because, right, it's an obsolete format. And let's face it, can't believe I'm saying this, but DVDs and CDs are becoming an obsolete format quickly because there's preservation and conservation issues. I agree with Crystal, though. It's a mitigated, you will know best. You know your organization. You will know best. There's always that, oh, we didn't realize. Thanks for letting us know. Sometimes it's a great way to start. If they go, I own the copyright, we're like, oh, with photos, because that's my area. It's like, I took that photo, I own it. Oh, well, it's a fabulous photo. Can we talk about maybe getting some rights to put it on our website? 9 times out of 10, the person's more flattered than, oh, really? You think it's this important? Well, of course, and the idea that we didn't know, we did our best, our due diligence. When we would go for rights for things, we'd send a registered letter to the last known address of the person we think we got it from. If it comes back unopened, returned to us, we save that unopened letter in a file. So we showed we did due diligence. So I think that you're going to know the risk yourself, but part of me just goes, no, the 60s and 70s, unless they're just talking trash about somebody, and then it's even better to read.
Yes, and I would also add that if they were affiliated with your organization and they did that work as part of their work with your organization, that is work for hire, and technically your organization owns the copyright to that. So it depends on the context of what it is on those, but you might not need to worry about it in that sense either. So that's something else to consider when you're doing your copyright assessment of the material. Okay, so we are just at about 3:30. So again, join me in thanking all of our presenters today for sharing this valuable information. We hope to partner with SFA again in the future for more sessions like this related to archives and processing collections. So subscribe to our newsletter or to our listserv to get more information about that as that comes available. SSDN also hosts several discussions throughout the year related to different topics like this, so you'll get information about those events as well. And again, we will be sharing this recording and all of the affiliated resources with everyone who registered, and it will be available on our website and YouTube channel as well. So keep your eyes open for that. And thank you everyone for joining us today. I hope everyone has a good holiday weekend, and have a great day.
Thanks.